Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Bolling, along with Kat Timpf and Eboni K. Williams. We are the Fox News specialists. You're looking at Nationals Stadium, where in just 2 hours from now, the annual congressional ball game will start, just a day after a crazed gunman attempted to assassinate a field filled with Republican representatives because of a hatred of Donald Trump and right-leaning government. The game will raise over $1 million for charities like the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Washington and the newly added Capitol Police Memorial Fund. The fact that this game is going off on schedule is a testament to American pride, American courage, and American tenacity. Your thoughts on this, Kat?
Absolutely.
Great stuff, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Struggles, but we bounce back, and all the donations. It's really great to see people come together and support this.
Your thoughts, Eboni?
100%, Eric, and better than ever. Last year, I think they raised about $500,000. This year, they raised over $1 million for this type of stuff. This is fantastic, and yes, the spirit of tenacity and the American way.
39-39-1. That's the record. So this will be the 80th meeting. It'll be the tiebreaker tonight. But let's meet today's specialist. He's the former governor of Arkansas, a radio talk show host, and best-selling author, and a former presidential candidate. And he specializes in hunting and music. It says that not at the same time, but I think maybe sometimes at the same time. Mike Huckabee is here. And he once worked at the Securities and Exchange Commission. He's a Fox News contributor, and he's the associate editor of the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. So naturally, he specializes in economics and financial issues. James Freeman is here. Yesterday, I suggested the less vitriol at President Trump may have been a mitigating factor in the shooter's plan to kill Republicans. I cited example after example of liberal politicians and celebrities using deadly metaphors for their dislike of Trump policies. But instead of a mea culpa, delusional Democrat Nancy Pelosi decided it wasn't their fault and called out Republicans for the attack on, wait for it, Republicans.
I think that the comments made by my Republican colleagues are outrageous, beneath the dignity of the job that they hold, beneath the dignity of the respect that we would like Congress to command. How dare they say such a thing? How dare they?
Governor, more divisiveness coming from the left.
I mean, when did she say this? Was this like yesterday or today?
Yeah.
My gosh. I mean, everybody was saying, how long will this civility last? Well, now we know. Not very long. And I'm not surprised. I mean, I remember after 9/11, you had all the members of Congress standing at the Capitol steps, singing God Bless America. Everybody was together, and that didn't last but a few days either. And it's unfortunate, but I think we also need to pull back and remind ourselves that what makes this a great nation is the fact that we can disagree. We can even yell and scream at each other. That's all part of America. What we can't do is shoot each other. And we have to come to a place where we understand that there is something that we don't talk about very much, but this is the heart of how to fix it. It's called morality. And if people had a moral conscience in which they said, I value you as a person. I don't value what you stand for. I don't agree with it, but I value you, and therefore I would do nothing to ever hurt you or to impede your ability or yours or yours or yours. That's where we're lacking in this country.
Yeah, but James, when you have crazy people mixed in, the governor's right. Morality amongst normal people would say, hey, let's take a step back, take a breath, and maybe ratchet down the rhetoric. But a lot of crazy people are listening to these politicians, celebrities, and media personalities saying, hey, they mean business, therefore I got to take things into my own hands.
Yeah, and what's maybe really disturbing is that there's actually no evidence this guy was crazy. There's no history, as far as we've seen in media accounts, of psychological illness, psychiatric issues. Obviously a very bad guy from his history even before the shooting, but you do struggle to understand this. But look, it's obviously you get yourself into trouble assigning blame for these kind of things to people who are not the shooter. But I think this is a moment where it would be nice if, for example, critics of the president stopped calling themselves the resistance, as if they're akin to the French fighting Nazis in World War II. That's not what we have here in this country. It'd be nice if they said, he is my president.
And may I also add the resistance on social media? It's resist, and it's also Antifa, which is the anti-fascist movement, and they're the same group, the anti-Trump group.
As if we have a fascist government in the United States. And, you know, it's a good moment to think, you know, maybe the Bernie Sanders is my president T-shirt ought to go now.
Well, you know, so I never want to get rid of a nice T-shirt if you like it.
Okay, fair point.
The shooter bad guy. He has a history of being cruel to animals, to children, to his girlfriend. He's a bad guy. We need to make sure also to not go too far and, blaming other people because, like you said, that can be a little slippery. Shooting, shooter's fault. He was an adult guy, his fault. But when something like this happens, you should be inspired to, for the sake of goodness, wanting to join together because something like this happens.
But, Eboni, when the other side of the political spectrum and the crazy people on the opposite side, they look at the other side being not only just a political nemesis and opposite to their views, when they actually start to feel it's some sort of physical threat, that's when we get in trouble. And a lot of people aren't as rational as the 5 people on this set right now.
No, they're not, Eric. And that's why, as Governor Huckabee was speaking, humanity is what I hear you speaking about as well. A moral compass, treating each other as like human beings. And we are beyond just the D's or the R's or the I's or the big L's or little L's beside our political beliefs. We are human beings. And that's not what we have anymore, Eric. What we have are people that don't just hate Donald Trump because of a border wall policy or don't just hate Barack Obama because of Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. They despise the essence of who they are and what they represent. And this is what we're seeing play out.
Listen to this, though. Let's take a look. It brings up 2 recent examples that showcase how the left is using more and more violent methods to make their political points. First, check this out. The Berkeley, California riots in February, where a right-wing provocateur was set to speak on campus, which instead devolved into absolute chaos when left-wing goons went on a rampage, leading to the cancellation of the event. Remember that one? Also, second, just this past weekend, where a far-left counter-demonstration attacked anti-Sharia law protesters holding rallies across the country. Now, Gov, I got, beat up a little bit last night for a monologue that I put blaming the left, but these are left-wing protests. They're getting more and more violent.
What's really troubling is Berkeley was once the center of the free speech movement. My gosh, when I was a teenager back in the 60s, it was where people were rioting to make sure that other people could be heard. Now they're rioting so that people can't be heard. And I'm wondering, where are those aging hippies, those ones who now get free Part D Medicare drugs, who ought to be mellowed out enough to be able to say, hey, kids, we were fighting for your right to hear speech you didn't like, not to shut it down. That really concerns me, that people don't even understand the genius of America is that we can have speech that we disagree with, but we don't have to be disagreeable when we hear it.
And see, Kat, in my opinion, is when there are people who felt like they've been left behind by the world, by the economy, by America, and they see these left-wing protests get violent like that, they start to say, I want to be part of that, and they're going to make it bigger and bigger to call attention to whatever their thing is.
Yeah, again, though, I don't think that it's anyone's fault but a murderer when a murder happens. I really think that it's important to say that. I think that for many reasons, it's very clear that the rhetoric on both sides has gotten very heated. That's very, very clear. And of course, when you're talking about protests and speeches, you don't see right-wing people protesting left-wing stuff like that. I will say that. But overall, there's nothing beneficial about slinging vitriol back and forth. So it doesn't have to be a case where, oh, don't sling this kind of hatred because this will happen. We shouldn't want to sling this kind of hatred, period.
But do you not think that this ratchet of violence, taking the protests to the next level of violence and rioting, is partly responsible for things like what happened yesterday?
I think the 66-year-old adult man who shot those people is the one who's responsible for shooting.
Okay, what do you think, Eboni? Where do you land on this one?
I mean, I agree ultimately. Of course, Kat's right. This is his responsibility. But I want to get back to something James said, which is that when we talk about mental illness, there was nothing documented in this guy's history. We don't have a diagnosis of bipolar or schizophrenia. But again, I think what we're all kind of talking around and touching on a bit is the hysteria that some people are finding themselves around political disagreement. It is no longer just a normal thing. I mean, it is really, truly, to me, Eric, broaching a place of absolute hysteria that is playing out in a violent way.
Well, so I don't know if producers can do that second clip again. James, take a look at it. Remember, what this was in the weekend, last weekend in New York, was anti-Sharia protesters. They were calm. They were protesting. They were falling within their First Amendment right to do what they were doing. It's when the opposite said, we don't like what you represent, it became violent. They became violent, and that was the left wing beating up on the anti-Sharia protesters. Yeah,
the attempted political assassination on Wednesday this week obviously was on a much higher level. We should react more. But this is a growing trend of more violence, attempts to silence people. Not to blame anyone for particular actions, but if we are talking about why is the First Amendment no longer respected, why is free speech no longer respected across the political spectrum, you have to put some of the blame on Hillary Clinton, who basically led a campaign to prevent people from making a movie about her. A lot of people on the left, they say Citizens United as if this was some great, horrible stain on American history. What it said was you can make a movie criticizing Hillary Clinton, and you can get people to distribute it.
Question, James. Now, I'm no Hillary Clinton fan. I've been very clear about that. But you're not connecting Hillary Clinton to what happened yesterday.
No, I'm not at all.
Okay.
To be clear, I'm not assigning any blame to any violence.
Okay.
What I am saying is to go back to your question about where did tolerance for the First Amendment go? Don't we believe in free speech anymore?
Well,
that's part of the problem. Free speech used to be...
Is free speech, are we allowed to say... we cited example after example yesterday of Democrats saying the Republican health care law will kill you. It will kill your children. It's that Nancy Pelosi herself said it's deadly. Isn't that, you know, free speech? Yes, we all agree, but there's a line where free speech becomes dangerous speech.
Can I ask you this question, Eric? I don't like it either, but here we go. In the Tea Party, when Barack Obama came out with the Affordable Care Act, people felt like that was socialism. They called Barack Obama a socialist. That's fine. Let's say you take that position. People in the Tea Party said that that type of socialism will kill us and kill America. And that language is out there, and we all know that.
You know, I think that there's something maybe we're missing.
Yeah, go ahead.
But that did happen, right?
Well, I think sometimes the reason this stuff gets so overheated is because it's all some people do. That they have a one-dimensional life.
They need hobbies.
No, let me be honest.
I hear you.
I hear people and they say, I watch news all day long. Then I tell them, I feel sorry for you. Listen to some music. Put a cork and a hook in the water and catch some fish. Take a walk. Do something else with your life. For God's sake, don't just spend all of it.
And they just tweet at people they hate all day. Nothing but hate type.
That will make anybody crazy.
Have some good barbecue.
What's that?
Have some good barbecue.
Have some great barbecue.
When this shooter belongs to a Facebook group called Terminate the Republican Party, and when former Attorney General Loretta Lynch says in a video talking about protesting, they've marched, they've bled, and yes, some have died. We did this before. We can do this again. I don't know. It just feels like we've ventured beyond free speech into dangerous speech.
Okay, so there is dangerous speech that is free speech. That's why I'm trying to ask you. I'm talking about free speech. Whenever I talk about free speech on the show, people think I mean good speech. I would not say that some of these things are good speech. They're certainly not nice, and some of them can be dangerous, but they are under the First Amendment. So what do we do about it? I don't want the government to be in the position of deciding what is and is not acceptable speech, because that's a really dangerous place to be.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting any law that limits someone from saying, hey, that healthcare law could be deadly or is deadly. I'm saying that we can point the finger at these lawmakers and say, you're at least partly responsible.
You're talking about human decency.
Mitigating factor?
I think I hear you talking about human decency, Eric, and certainly I think we can all agree that would be nice to return to.
All right, I hear music. Must mean time to go. Up next, members of the mainstream media sinking to new lows following yesterday's congressional shooting, plus a remarkable exchange between Eboni and Ted Nugent, friend for the show, on her radio show earlier today. We'll be back in a moment.
The New York Times botching an editorial on yesterday's congressional shooting. The piece linked the gunman who shot then Congresswoman Gabby Giffords in 2011 to a political map circulated by Sarah Palin. Now, it's a long debunked theory, and following an immediate backlash, the Times has now issued a correction. But that didn't stop Sarah Palin from taking to Facebook, writing, quote, "Today, a pervasively biased media's knee-jerk blame game is attempting to destroy innocent people with lies and more fake news. As I said yesterday, I'd hoped the media had collectively matured since the last attack on a representative, when media coverage spewed blatant lies about who was to blame. There's been no improvement. The New York Times has gotten worse." Governor Huckabee,
I think it is.
know the governor? Yes.
It's gotten worse, and I totally agree with Sarah Palin. My word to her would be, you go, girl. 'Cause I'm going to tell you something. The New York Times has been recklessly irresponsible with the truth. That's why I call them the New York Slimes, and it's the Washington Compost, because I no longer have respect for them as organs of journalism. They're just diseased organs now that need to be probably removed. But look, Sarah Palin has even floated the idea that she might sue them. God bless her. I hope she does, and I hope she succeeds.
By people canceling their subscriptions, not you're not urging a violent act.
Well, they're going away, but it's just not fast enough for me.
Why don't we ask Jim, if the editorial page made it a blatant error like this, can you imagine at Wall Street Journal, 12 hours? It wouldn't be up there for 12 hours.
Well, that was a long time, and even after they corrected it, they're still smearing her. They just softened it, I think, enough where they think maybe they've got legal cover, but it still ties her without any facts at all to that 2011 attack.
Do you remember? I remember specifically what this was. Sarah Palin had a map showing congressional districts that she thought were vulnerable or available to Republicans to pick up, and there were targets on them, not on the people, but on the districts.
Plus, he'd become obsessed with his hatred for Giffords years before that. And so I'm a writer. You know, I write for National Review. I write columns. And this thing that I do before I publish it or submit it to my editor is I make sure that it's true. I make sure that there's nothing in it that's just completely made up, crazy banana land garbage. Yeah. They should try it.
It's incredible, Kat.
Yeah, it's crazy,
maybe
right?
Maybe you should try it too, James.
We have to Google.
You guys,
I'm going to give that a shot.
You guys do a fantastic job, and here's the difference. And I'm someone who read the Times consistently before this election, and they had to come out and admit post this election that they had wronged their base, they had wronged their readership, and they apologized. I then was hopeful, right, that this is going to get better. Yeah. And then instead what we're seeing is this type of thing. So is there a way that they can come back from this, or have they just gone off a cliff to never return?
I mean, they could apologize frequently, but I guess it would start to lose its impact after a while. But, you know, one thing is, as many errors as there were in that editorial, one thing they did do, and I'm sure it just killed them to do this, was they said, good job, Donald Trump, on the way you handled the aftermath of the shooting. And, you know, that couldn't have been pleasant. You can imagine them having to sit down and type that out, but they did.
But they did it. Okay, well, speaking of all of this heated political rhetoric, today on my afternoon radio show, I spoke with a guy who's a little bit more than familiar with controversy, musician Ted Nugent, and he gave a very unexpected take on yesterday's shooting.
I think we've reached critical mass. I tend to agree. You and I had a bit of a confrontation because of some of the language I've used, and I have reevaluated my approach. Even though I'm a street fighter, I'm from Detroit. We use language in the street. We use certain harsh terms. But at the tender age of 69, my wife has convinced me that I just can't use those harsh terms. I cannot, and I will not. And I encourage even my friends / enemy on the left in the Democrat and liberal world that we have got to be civil to each other, that the whole world is watching America, where you have the God-given right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and we have got to be more respectful to the other side.
Eric Bolling, how about those apples?
Why did you come to,
of course I'm coming to you, Bolling.
Why did you come to me?
Because the last time Ted Nugent called me, you were sitting right beside me.
Come on, Ted. Listen, it's like telling Anthony Weiner giving you a speech on fidelity. I'm shocked. Look, he's a Motor City man. He's a friend. That's what he does. He's a provocateur. To say we need to be more civil.
But honestly, Eric, actually, and I complimented him. I said, look, I'm not going to declare you the next MLK here, Ted, but this is an important step in the American.
Admitting you have a problem is the first step to recovery.
It's an important step in all of us getting better on this issue, right? And seriously, I thought it was classy to use Governor Palin's words, mature, right? Because just 2 weeks ago, he doubled down. He called into our show, doubled down, pushed back on me, calling him out about his comments about President Obama and eating a gun. And today he said, you know what? I still hate Obamacare. I still hate all those left-leaning policies.
Still loves guns?
Still loves guns. Definitely still loves guns, for sure, Kat. But there's a better way to do it.
You know, I've hunted with Ted Nugent. I consider him a friend.
Wow.
He's a great guy. Let me tell you something about Ted that a lot of people don't know. He is one of the most tender-hearted people you'll ever be around. And a lot of what people hear from Ted, it is his personality, it's his way of doing it, but he's doing it with a great sense of humor and, surprisingly, real respect for other people. But he just comes out there like a, you know, just a herd,
and that's what
stampede.
he said. And he said the energy when he's on stage, and he got riled up with the but he said, you know what? Now what I'm seeing, to your point earlier, James, people are taking it too literally. You know, that's not my intention. I never meant that literally, but people are taking it that way. And if this is the consequence, what happened to Representative Scalise, we can't do it anymore. So maybe it took all that for him, but it seems like he's ready to take a step back.
Hey, it's if Nuge wants to kind of settle into more of a statesman role as he hits the September of his years, that's
I have
exciting.
it on good authority that the president is going to appoint him to be the ambassador to the Court of St. James coming next week.
And he's going to start playing the harp instead of the steel guitar.
No way, Jose.
Electric.
Ted, I have confidence that you are going to, I'm going to take you at your word, you're going to dial it back.
I love Ted.
Absolutely.
I love
I love Ted.
Leakers striking again, this time revealing that special counsel Robert Mueller is reportedly investigating President Trump for possible obstruction in the Russia probe, but the president and his legal team are punching back. Stay with us.
And if you don't know, now you know.
Leakers launching a new broadside against President Trump. The Washington Post is reporting that special counselor Robert Mueller is looking into whether President Trump tried to obstruct the Russia probe. It cites 5 anonymous sources for its story, and the president's legal team is fighting back.
But if this was true, that 5 individuals inside of the United States government, whether it was the FBI or special counsel's office, wherever it came from, leaked information about the president of the United States to the Washington Post, information about a supposed investigation, that is a crime. Now, I mean, we could say it's outrageous, we could say it's irresponsible. The leak of this information is a crime.
Eboni, what do you think? You're the lawyer.
Well, look, it's so interesting, though, because leak used to be automatic crime. Now the way people are using it, more cavalier, James Comey, I don't know. This is a problem, though, and I'm not going to sit here and defend these leaks, because maybe this time it's not the biggest problem, Kat, but the next time maybe it interferes with national security, as we've seen in other leaks, and now we've got a whole threatened security interest, and that's why we have to stop them at all costs.
We definitely have leaks.
Yeah, we know
we have leaks.
Yeah.
And we don't seem to want to investigate these leaks too vehemently, but we have allegations of collusion with absolutely no evidence, but we're 7 investigations in on that one. A little bit of imbalance. Trump's tweet today was amazing. It was perfect. He tweeted, "Crooked H," meaning Hillary, "destroyed phones with a hammer, bleached emails, had husband meet with AG days before she was cleared, and they talk about obstruction with him." That's a great point.
I think he really missed saying crooked Hillary. I think that was probably a big part of it. Well, because the standard's high. It's tough to prove obstruction, so I guess it was tough to prove with Hillary, and it'd be tough to prove with him, too. I mean, you have to show intent to corrupt. For corruption. How do you show that?
We don't see all these investigations, special counsel. We don't have 7 different groups.
We all know life is different for the Clintons. That's something
true.
That's been well established.
But let's be real clear. This is not happening because people are on a truth squad mission. This is not happening because people truly care whether or not Donald Trump is telling the truth or not. This is happening because people want to discredit and delegitimize his presidency. This is as close to a coup d'etat as we're going to see without the use of weapons. That's what I believe this is about. And the fact that there's leaks that just continually pour out, all based always on anonymous sources, illegal, and I'm glad that we all recognize that that is a crime to do this kind of stuff. Let's ask ourselves, why is it happening? It's happening to discredit and to completely distract Donald Trump from being president of the United States.
It's interesting that they haven't found any evidence of collusion. What do you think would be in a situation where maybe he was obstructing investigation into a fake crime? I mean, could we see that happen? Everything's so bizarre. I don't even know what to predict anymore.
Well, I guess a lot of levels to this, right? Let's assume for the moment it's true. You would hope that Mueller would be focusing his resources on finding whether there actually is a premise to his investigation, right? Whether there really was any collusion. But then as we think about the sources on this story, yeah, wow, 5 people in an investigation are leaking. When I was at the SEC, I didn't work in the enforcement division, but I know that the people who did took that very seriously. This was not non-public information about a matter being investigated, and it's true at the Justice Department. As journalists, certainly we try to get leaks all the time. It's not that easy unless you're getting background on cases that have already been brought.
You know what the problem with this is? We're spending so much time doing this. There are administration officials that have to testify. They have to go. They're being deposed. Donald Trump is trying to put together an administration, put together a policy going forward, trying to get the country back in shape, back in line, and he's spending his time worrying who's going to say what about him, who's going to leak what anonymously, Governor. Not only leak, but leak anonymously.
They didn't defeat him at the polls. He won the election. They never thought that would happen. They're not defeating him on the policy level because right now the economy is doing better than it's done in many years. Jobs are coming back. Stock market's gangbusters. He's building relationships across the world that we haven't had in a long time. So they can't beat him on the policy level. What else are they going to do?
This is what I would tell the president. I would tell him what I would tell my clients when they were under investigation. It's very hard to do, but you have to. Look the other way. I agree with you, Eric. He needs to focus on his agenda, whatever that is. Keep going with the economic plan. Keep going with infrastructure, tax cuts, what have you. Push the agenda forward so that he can be very, very well positioned for 2018. And if there's nothing there, which at this point I will say this is where the leaks are now costing those trying to be in on this Trump takedown. Because if you're someone like myself or Kat or whoever who's really looking at this and wanting something to come of it substantively, you know what the leaks do? It makes me not take the investigation as seriously as it's laid out.
You know, Ebony, as a lawyer, how much time and mental capacity? Forget the money. The time and mental capacity when you're the target of a lawsuit.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
It's insane.
What I'm suggesting is difficult.
You wonder who's going to say what, if they're going to lie, if someone is going to misread.
So you're saying you would not advise your clients to tweet out how what they're accused of doing is nothing compared to what Hillary Clinton has done?
I would not do that, but also I would try to tell him to, you know what, he can't control it. I hear what you're saying. It's stressful, and when you're the target and you're the subject, it's very hard to look the other way, but he can't control what Robert Mueller is going to do, so he needs to focus on what he can control, and that's the business of the American people.
Talk about hypocrisy. The left didn't care when Hillary Clinton, State Department, sold the Russians 20% of our uranium production. That was nothing. That was no big deal. Look the other way on that. But Donald Trump, we got to find some collusion.
I thought his tweet was really entertaining. If I were Trump, I would leave this to the lawyers now. Less said, the better. But I agree with Ebony 100%. If Bob Mueller, who has built a great reputation over many years, wants to keep it, he will not have this looking like a political operation, which it does when it leaks like that.
All right, we got to get going. Up next, the jury deadlocked in Bill Cosby's sexual assault trial. And Ebony's docket is on the case right after this.
Welcome back to the Fox News Specialist. Our specialists today are Governor Mike Huckabee and James Freeman. Let's continue our conversation with the docket. He said, she said. That's essentially what the Bill Cosby trial has come down to. In the CSI age of armchair detectives and lawyers, jurors really appreciate evidence like DNA, fingerprints, other forensics, and eyewitnesses in their mission to determine that all-important threshold of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The Cosby jurors, well, they cannot seem to get there, at least not yet. The 7 men and 5 women, determining the fate of America's dad remain deadlocked after over 30 hours of deliberation. And as is the case with most sexual assaults, there are no eyewitnesses, and DNA and fingerprints really wouldn't help here because Mr. Cosby's defense is that his encounter with Miss Andrea Constand was consensual. So ultimately, this case will come down to the single most important element of any trial, credibility. Will these jurors believe Cosby, an American icon that changed culture, and for many, like myself, helped shine a bright and beautiful light on a black excellence in this country in a way in which we've never seen? Or will they believe Miss Constand, who, along with the testimony of her mother and one other woman who accused Cosby of assault, paint a very different picture of Bill Cosby, one of a disgusting sexual predator that routinely used Quaaludes and other drugs to disarm women that he wanted to assault? And frankly, Cosby admitted the part about the Quaaludes in his 2006 deposition. While over 60 women have now come forward with accusations, only these 2 were allowed to testify in this trial. And as everybody wants a conclusion to this American tragedy, it's important that jurors get this right and deliver a verdict, despite how difficult and heart-wrenching this process is for all involved. Now, for now, Mr. Cosby should continue to enjoy the presumption of innocence, but ultimately, our juror system will provide the single most needed thing in this case, and that is closure.
We didn't get it yet.
I know we haven't got it yet.
But they can retry this case, right?
Yes, and we don't know.
Can they retry with different accusers?
So it's a very good question. Two things. Number one, we don't necessarily know if we don't get a verdict here. They're deadlocked. They came back and told the judge, you know, we can't get to a verdict. The judge said, go back. And that's common in this kind of case where this much emotional cost is at stake. But if they never get there, Eric, your question is very pointed. It will look different if they try this case again. So we know that the prosecutors wanted 13 of some of the alleged other accusers to testify. They only got permission for one. One of two things happened. Either the judge says, you know what, I don't want another deadlock, so they let multiple women. Maybe that will help bolster the prosecution's case. Or they might say even that one was too prejudicial and no other witnesses get to testify next time.
What else is common in these cases is guys getting away with it. And when people ask, when a woman says, years down the road, or eventually says, somebody assaulted me, and they say, why didn't you report it to the police? It's because the real world is not Law and Order SVU. And when it's your word against his, and he's this guy who has power over you, and who do you think people are going to believe, or who do you think people are going to want to believe? So people should look at this and really think about it in terms of when we talk about sexual assault in this country and whether and why it is so hard for women to go to the police.
James, Kat is making a point that I think a lot of women in this country feel because either we know firsthand someone close to us or have unfortunately experienced it ourselves. But of course, the other side of that is if that happened, why? We know the facts in this case. She called Bill Cosby over 70 times after this happened, and she says it was in the scope of her role at Temple with the basketball program. But I'm just wondering and curious from the male point of view, does that wash?
Yeah, I don't know if I speak for all males, but I would say, I mean, for anyone looking at this case, if he does beat the rap, and I guess when the jury is deliberating this long, if you're the defense, you start to maybe get a little more confident. But if he does end up beating it, you hope it's because he's innocent and not because over 13 years.
I don't believe that 60 women are lying.
I know, it's hard to believe. I think, but you hope it's not because over those 13 years, evidence that might have helped her is not available anymore.
You know, a little context here. About 20 years ago, I was living with one of the accusers. I ended up being one of the accusers. Now, she never accused them back then, but she would tell me that Bill Cosby did do these types of things. I was just appalled. I was like, Bill Cosby would do something like that. Years and years went by. You know, lost touch, and then I noticed that she's not one in the trial, not one of the of the 3 in the trial, but one of the 60.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think Kat's right about this. So just because you don't accuse someone right away doesn't mean he's not guilty.
Yeah, and just because you continue to work with them, sometimes you have to continue to work with them. And a lot of times, because you have to continue to work with them is why they do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will tell you from a cultural standpoint, Governor, this was very hard for a lot of Americans to even wrap their minds around because they knew Bill Cosby as a comedian, from the Cosby Show, from a very generous philanthropic standpoint. I mean, this is a man who's given millions and millions and millions of dollars to education. And so this becomes very hard. But from a, I'm just kind of asking from a humanity standpoint, maybe even from a spiritual standpoint, people being good in one way, but possible of doing something very bad in another.
I think it's one of the realities of humanity. There are a lot of people who can do very good things and compartmentalize it, and then in the other compartment of their life do horrible things. I don't know what Bill Cosby did. I have no idea. Every time I hear this story, I want to go take a shower. In part because Bill Cosby was such a role model for many, many young men, and he talked about what was important in terms of getting an education, being responsible, don't expect other people to give you something you didn't work for. A lot of values that he was promoting publicly that we needed and that were worthwhile. I hate to see all of that totally thrown away. And if he did this stuff, then, you know, his legacy won't be those years of comedy and the years of being a role model. It's going to be the sexual predator role.
There's no way 60 women are lying. If they're listening, I believe you.
Well, you're not going to have closure if he beats the rap, right?
No,
because you've got all these other accusations.
Those accusations are still out there, for sure. Straight ahead, the family of Otto Warmbier, the American student brought home from North Korea, lashing out at the regime for his brutal treatment. Can justice be done here? Stay with us.
There's nothing compared, nothing compared to you. It's been so long.
All right, you're looking at a live feed from Nationals Park in Washington, D.C., where the congressional baseball game is about to kick off at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's a benefit baseball game. We're just told that President Donald Trump will deliver a video statement that'll be delivered right before the game starts. So we will keep our ears out for that. And if it happens during our hour, we'll let you know what he said. If not, You can always keep it here on Fox News to find out. Okay, Otto Warmbier is home in Cincinnati, but not in good shape. A team of doctors who have examined him held a press conference today detailing the state of Otto, and it's grim. They note Otto is in a state of what they call unresponsive wakefulness, and that contrary to what North Korea claims, there is zero evidence of botulism. Now recall, North Korea blamed Otto's vegetative state on his contracting botulism. So it begs the question, what kind of treatment did those captors expose Otto to that would render him almost brain dead? Governor, your thoughts on this? The pictures of him being escorted, back to the United States, brain dead, and then mind you, North Korean said it was due to botulism. Doctor said no botulism.
You know, I have to first of all react as a father. If this were my son, I would do anything to get him back, anything, and I would be so angry of the shape in which he came back. And I think that what we're seeing here is a revelation, not that we really needed it, that the North Koreans are an absolutely unmitigated disaster of a government. They have no real sense of integrity, honor, decency. Then you ask this question, why would any student group go to North Korea? I mean, you cannot look at that movie and say, oh, there's going to be a happy ending here. So that would be the question. Why did a student group ever go to North Korea?
Let me bring Jim here. Let's talk a little bit about the economics of this. China has to see this and say, maybe we need to rethink our North Korea policy.
Let's hope so. I think this is one of those tests of whether Donald Trump, the art of the deal guy, can do a deal here that really has eluded Republicans and Democrats before him. He's got to find a way to get China to participate in harsh economic sanctions. They don't want to do it. They do a lot of business with North Korea, but this is the test for him right now.
Eboni, one of the big issues here is these doctors said it's not a temporary condition either. This is extensive brain tissue loss.
Brain tissue loss. And when I heard that, Eric, I mean, I think it just, not, as the governor said, we needed any more evidence as to the complete, just unconscionable ability of North Korea to just show such wanton disregard for human life. But there you have it.
Yep. Sickening.
Does it warrant? I'm asking you because I know we're probably on the same similar fields in this. Does it warrant any sort of military response?
What are we going to do, honestly? I mean, the botulism thing is obviously garbage. They're probably laughing when they say that, but we're talking about a place where all the people who live there think that that's true and think that we're the ones going after them, and it's it's really, really just a sick, disgusting situation.
But let's be real clear. It's not just that this is the only guy that North Korea has mistreated.
Obviously.
They mistreat millions of their own people.
Right.
Their people are reduced to eating lawn clippings because they don't have any food. They're starving to death. They don't have utilities. This is a regime that I don't know that there's any hope for it. I don't think there's a reform that's going to work. Quite frankly, it may be that we tell China, why don't you annex North Korea? Because that may be about the only solution. They'd be better off under the Chinese leadership than they would be under this nutcase.
China doesn't want any of that, none of that action.
It's an old-fashioned Marxist dictatorship, and I think kids who think it's fun to wear T-shirts with Che Guevara, the murderer, might want to rethink really how cool and hip all of this is. But I think it says a lot about China too, doesn't it? That you have to go to all this effort to persuade them to stand away from this monstrous dictatorship. But I think, it's not hopeless, but it takes it's going to take probably a very long-term determined effort from the president to bring them around.
All right, we're going to leave right there. We got to go. But tonight, be sure to watch Tucker Carlson, 8 p.m. Eastern. He has an emotional, exclusive interview with Otto Warmbier's father, Fred, and how he and his wife are dealing with what happened to their son. Take a look.
We're doing okay. I worry about Cindy a little bit. I think she worries about me. We're taking it a moment at a time, a day at a time, and we're going to support each other like we agreed to do all this, and we're adjusting right now. We're adjusting to a different reality.
You can see all of Tucker's interview. That airs tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern right here on Fox News. But when we return, we circle back with our specialists, Governor Mike Huckabee and James Freeman. Do not go anywhere.
Time to circle back with our specialists, Mike Huckabee and James Freeman. All right, Governor, you said you went hunting with Ted Nugent?
Yeah.
Many times? Or just
Several
one?
times, yeah. And he had one of the best hunting dogs I've ever seen in my life, a dog named Gonzo. Ted Nugent is truly one of the great Americans I've ever been around. And he's a gentle, caring, great guy, and he's more fun to be with than you can ever imagine.
My question is for the governor as well. Governor, there's one Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is the deputy press secretary.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm guessing you're not going to answer it. And I want to follow up. So my question is, will she be drop the deputy and become the next press secretary?
I don't know. And by the way, she doesn't either. She really likes Sean Spicer, loves working with him, respects him a lot, and that's not her decision to make.
So let me follow up with a question. Would you want that for her? It's a very tough job.
It's a tough job. Look, I think my daughter's up to anything. She's great at what she does. I'm proud of her. She's a tough cookie, and don't ever underestimate a Southern woman, because when she starts the sentence with "bless your heart," she's about
you're in trouble.
cut into you like a deer.
Take your throat out.
They'll call it still magnolias for
Yeah,
nothing,
that's
right?
right. I'm telling you.
All right, James, here's one for you. What would you advise President Trump to tweet moving forward around this issue of the Russia probe?
I think he should tweet about no topics that are currently under investigation. So I think he should tweet about Arnold Schwarzenegger's ratings. I think if he wants to tweet about Rosie O'Donnell, that's great.
Fun stuff.
About hunting with nudes, another good topic.
Specialist?
Yeah,
All right,
specialist. Ideally the specialist. That's what he ought to be tweeting about. Nothing else.
Thank you to our Fox News specialists today, Governor Mike Huckabee and James Freeman. And we thank you all for watching. Make sure to follow us on social media at Specialist FNC on Twitter and Facebook. Remember, 5 o'clock will never be the same. Special Report is next. Take it away, Brett.
The national pastime in the nation's capital one night after what could have been a national tragedy. This is Special Report.